Hey, how's it going, guys? The one and only Mega Man NT125 here, coming at you with another Zelda Theory video. Probably the first one I've done. I mean, it's been a year and a half now since the last one. I often get comments from people wondering, why don't you make more videos about Zelda? And ultimately, I'd say a large part of it is you know, when I first started making theory videos, it was kind of like there weren't that many out there, actually. It was many years ago. But now it's like, it's kind of oversaturated. It's kind of like, what can I say that somebody else hasn't already said? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many, like, big Zelda YouTubers now. It's kind of like, it feels like, what's exactly the point? But I definitely wanted to make this video because it's something that I had been thinking about a lot, and I hadn't really seen many people talk about this, or at least talk about my idea. Really what I want to talk about is the placement of Breath of the Wild. It's been kind of like I mean, up until now, you know, they released the Hyrule Historia, the whole timeline, and then they sort of like strictly followed it. Like, they were like, when a game came out, this is where this game went, this is where this game went, and there wasn't really any like unknowns anymore. But then Breath of the Wild came out, and there's several interviews, which I'll leave links to in the description, where Aonuma is like, Breath of the Wild doesn't necessarily take place on any timeline, and then there's other times where he's contradicted himself, and he said that there is a place, and we're just not ready to reveal it yet. It's definitely been confusing, especially when in-game there's a lot of contradictory information. There's a lot of sort of proof for each timeline. Before the game came out, I was a strong believer of a Wind Waker placement. And then after the game came out and I saw some cutscenes, I was like, okay, this is definitely Twilight Princess placement. But by Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, I of course mean the adult and child timeline. It's just those games tend to be the ones that people think of when it comes to those timelines. So that's how I refer to them. But then later, an interview came out where they were like, well, we don't actually know where it goes. So it's definitely very confusing. There's also a lot of proof that it could be on the failure timeline, or what I call the 2D timeline, as a like far off sequel to the original Legend of Zelda. And truthfully, I can see all three of those working. And when I think about it, and I look at the information given to us in the game, and now there's all this different contradictory information, I think that point blank, Breath of the Wild can go anywhere. And I think that's kind of the idea behind the story. Is, I mean, the lore of Breath of the Wild happened 10,000 years before the game happened. And even then, that original lore 10,000 years ago was like a super advanced civilization. So that's who knows how long after any of the other timelines. So I think the point is that Breath of the Wild takes place so far into the future that it can hypothetically go on any timeline. Of course, there are certain timelines where it works better on, but I think when you look at it as a whole, it can fit anywhere comfortably far afterwards, because there's evidence in the game that it could be from a Hyrule after the flood, after the water has receded. There's proof there. I made a video about it back before the game was released. There's proof in-game dialogue, not just in like text or map locations that it takes place in Twilight Princess, and thematically, it works perfectly as a sequel to the original Legend of Zelda. And I think that's kind of the idea, is that they didn't want to necessarily say that it definitively goes on this timeline. Now, of course, they might retcon that later. They can always change the timeline. That's certainly not set in stone. I don't know why people think it is. They can change it as they please. But thematically, like when you look at it as a whole, I think it makes the most sense. That technically it's on all three timelines, but it's also on none of them. And it can be on any one of them, and it's mostly up to personal preference. I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't like that. Personally, I don't really mind. I feel like back in the day when I was super serious about Zelda timelines, I probably would have been pissed off. But I personally like it. I view the game as being on the child timeline, but it can go on any of them. So really, I haven't seen a whole lot of YouTubers necessarily talk about this in this way. I've seen YouTubers talk about specific placements, or they're mad that there's no specific place. And I really do think that that's the idea behind the story, is you have to look at it. I mean, in the game itself, it's talking about the past games as legends, like stories that are told. Like, I'm sure that in the Breath of the Wild universe, there's probably timeline theorists but in universe, they'd be like researchers who try to piece everything together that happened far in the past. And I think that's kind of the idea behind it. It certainly fits with the theme of how it's the Hyrule in Breath of the Wild is not the Hyrule that we've known. It's gone through a lot. Ganon himself has been through like the ringer so many times that he's not even human. He's not a pig. He's just like a monstrosity. He can't even reform. He can't even regenerate. And I think that really says a lot about how far in the future Breath of the Wild actually is. Because Hyrule had so much time to become an advanced civilization, and then for that civilization to decline back into essentially like the medieval age. So I definitely want to like hear your guys' thoughts about this. I don't expect this video to get too many views. It's just something I kind of wanted to talk about and hear some opinions in the comments. So just let me know. Hit me up. I'm not going to do any crazy like editing or anything like that with this video. Just something I wanted to get off my chest. So see you guys next time, if there is a next time.